The first thing Commander Eli Cross felt was the weight of silence pressing against his chest, thicker than armor and heavier than fear. He stood at the center of a foreign hall with his pulse hammering so loudly he was sure it betrayed him. Every instinct screamed that he had walked into a trap, yet his boots refused to step back. The hall was vast and unreal, carved from pale stone that glowed softly as if remembering an older sun. Tall columns rose like frozen sentinels, and light spilled through narrow windows in long golden bands. Eli's reflection shimmered on the polished floor, a lone human surrounded by an empire that did not need him alive. Then she stepped forward. Princess Aralise of Vathar moved with calm authority, her golden dress whispering across the stone as though the floor itself bowed to her. Long brown hair flowed freely down her back, catching the light, and a delicate crown rested above eyes sharp enough to cut steel. Her expression held no anger, yet it was not gentle either. Eli tightened his grip on the hilt at his side, though he did not draw it. The blade stayed sheathed by choice, not mercy. Behind the princess, a knight in ornate armor stood still, slightly out of focus, yet Eli felt the danger radiating from him like heat. "So," Aralise said, her voice steady and low, "the human warrior chooses to stand." The words echoed, not loudly, but deeply, as if the hall remembered every voice that dared speak defiance. Eli swallowed and forced himself to meet her gaze. Running had crossed his mind many times during the long march here, but now it felt impossible. "I didn't come to kneel," Eli replied. "I came to end the chase." A flicker of surprise crossed her face, gone in an instant. Around them, the air seemed to shift, alive with unspoken judgment. Aralise studied him as if he were a puzzle carved from bone and stubborn will. "You crossed 3 forbidden sectors," she said. "You defeated my scouts and survived the glass marsh. Tell me, human, do you fear death, or do you simply misunderstand it?" Eli almost laughed, though the sound died in his throat. Images flashed through his mind, burning ships, broken worlds, and the quiet faces of those he failed to save. Fear had lost its power long ago. "I fear letting monsters decide who deserves to breathe," he said softly. The night behind her shifted, metal whispering against metal. Eli felt the tension spike, sharp enough to draw blood. A single command from the princess would end him where he stood. Instead, Aralise raised her hand. The gesture was small, but the hall obeyed instantly. The night froze again, and the silence returned, thicker than before. Her eyes searched Eli's face, lingering on the scars he no longer remembered earning. "You don't look like the monster my advisors described," she said. "You look tired." That unexpected observation struck deeper than any blade. Eli felt something crack inside him, a wall he had built to survive. He straightened anyway, refusing to show weakness. "You summoned me," he said, "or did you forget the signal you sent into human space?" A subtle tension rippled through her posture. The chandeliers above flickered, as though reacting to her emotion. For the first time, doubt crept into her gaze. "That message," Aralise said slowly, "was never meant to reach you." Eli's breath caught. The mission briefing had been vague, the signal distorted, almost hidden. He had followed it anyway, drawn by something he could not explain. "Then why am I here?" he asked. The princess took one step closer, closing the distance that had kept them safe from each other. Eli felt the gravity of her presence, not just royal but deeply personal, like standing near a storm that knew his name. "Because," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "your arrival changes everything." The knight's hand hovered near his weapon. The light in the hall dimmed, then brightened again, unstable and watching. Eli sensed that this moment was not a meeting but a fracture point. He did not yet know whether he would leave this hall alive, crowned as an enemy, or bound by something far more dangerous than chains. And Princess Aralise, despite her calm mask, felt it too. This was not the encounter she had prepared for. It was the one fate had been hiding. Eli's eyes never left hers, though every instinct screamed to flee. The hall, so grand and impossibly quiet moments ago, now seemed alive, each column and chandelier holding its breath alongside them. Even the soft golden light spilling through the windows felt sharper, as if measuring the tension in the air. Aralise tilted her head slightly, studying him, but her usual regal composure faltered. There was something raw in his presence, something that made her pulse quicken despite her training, despite the walls of her upbringing. She had faced enemies more powerful, armies more cunning, but nothing had unsettled her like this human. "You walked alone through the forbidden wastes," she said, her voice measured, yet layered with curiosity. "Do you know what that means in our world?" "I know what it means to survive," Eli replied evenly. "And I know what it means to face someone who might kill me at any second." Aralise smiled faintly, almost imperceptibly, a flash of amusement that didn't reach her eyes. "Most who enter the forbidden wastes do not return. They become ghosts, or worse, stories meant to warn others. And yet here you are, standing before me, unbroken." Eli's jaw tightened. Maybe stories aren't always true. For a moment, neither moved. The knight behind her shifted his weight, an unspoken reminder that this was not a friendly audience. But the human and the princess, two figures so different in origin, held the center of the hall in quiet defiance. Aralise felt it then, a dangerous spark, one that could ignite or consume everything around it. "You have courage," she said finally, her voice softer, almost intimate. "I've met warriors before, but none like you." Eli's hand brushed the hilt of his sword, though it remained sheathed. "I don't do this for praise. I do it because it's the right thing, even if it means dying in the process." Her gaze lingered on him, and something shifted inside her. The formality, the distance, the weight of her crown, all of it threatened to crumble. She realized in that suspended moment that the human before her was not merely a warrior but a force that stirred something she had long buried. Fascination, perhaps even longing. The Golden Hall suddenly felt smaller, intimate in a way no one could understand. Aralise took a cautious step closer. "Do you understand why your presence is dangerous?" she asked. Eli raised an eyebrow. "I thought danger was part of the job description for being a warrior." Aralise laughed softly, a melodic sound that echoed off the columns, making him flinch slightly. It was the first warmth he had felt in weeks, and it unnerved him. She noticed the slight flinch and tilted her head with curiosity, as if studying a rare animal in the wild. "You do not fear me as others do," she said, "not even a little." "I've learned that fear can be paralyzing," Eli admitted. "I've also learned that sometimes it blinds people to what's really in front of them." Arali's eyes narrowed. "And what's in front of you human?" "I don't know yet," he said honestly, "but I'm willing to find out." The silence that followed carried the weight of worlds. It was more than a standoff. It was a quiet acknowledgement that both had crossed invisible lines they had never expected to. Every step, every breath, felt like a test neither could fail. Then, without warning, the knight behind her shifted, the soft scrape of armor cutting through the tension. Arali's head snapped toward him, and Eli realized the room had shifted from quiet curiosity to imminent threat. The golden light danced across their faces, highlighting every emotion, every hesitation. "You are not welcome here," the knight growled, stepping forward. Aralise raised her hand sharply, stopping him mid-motion. Her gaze returned to Eli, more intense than ever. "If you move, you will force my hand," she said, voice calm but deadly. "And I do not wish to do that, not yet." Eli met her eyes, sensing the depth of the unspoken words. There was trust in her restraint and something else he couldn't name. Respect, admiration, perhaps both. For the first time since stepping into this alien world, he felt that the encounter was no longer about fear or survival. It was about something far more unpredictable. And neither of them could yet see where it would lead. Outside, the wind whispered against the palace walls, carrying secrets from a galaxy far beyond their understanding. Inside, two worlds, human and Vathari, held their breath, poised on the edge of a story that had only just begun. Even the hall seemed to lean closer, curious to see who would move first. Eli's pulse quickened. He realized he was not just facing a princess. He was standing on the precipice of something neither of them could control, and yet he could not turn away. The golden light flickered again. Shadows stretched across the floor, entwining around them like invisible chains. And somewhere deep in both of their hearts, a quiet question began to form. What happens when a human refuses to fear an alien queen? The tension in the hall thickened like storm clouds ready to burst. Eli's eyes darted to the night, then back to Princess Arelys. He could feel the subtle shift in her posture, her hand, poised over the ceremonial dagger at her belt, betrayed a conflict she tried hard to hide. She had not expected him to come, and yet here he stood, unshaken. "You know why they sent me," Eli said quietly, his voice carrying across the marble. "They call me a threat, a human who doesn't belong in your world." Arelys' lips pressed into a thin line. "They are right to fear you," she admitted. "Not because of your strength, but because you are unpredictable. You do not follow their rules, their expectations." "And you," Eli asked, tilting his head slightly, "do you expect me to follow yours?" Her eyes widened just a fraction before she masked it with a calm, almost regal expression. "I do not know," she confessed. The words slipped out like water through fingers, rare and dangerous. "I have been trained to command, to anticipate, to control. But you," she paused, searching his face as if looking for some answer that might never exist. "You disrupt that." Eli could see it now. The distance that had separated them, the invisible walls of royalty and duty, were trembling. He wondered if she realized the effect she had on him as well. The warmth of her gaze, the quiet authority, the subtle curiosity, it was impossible not to notice. Before either could speak again, the knight made a move. His boots scraped the marble floor, loud in the silence. "Princess," he said, his voice low but firm, "this human has no business here. He should be." "Stop!" Arelys' voice rang like a bell, cutting him off mid-sentence. The knight froze, eyes narrowing in frustration. "You have no say in this, not right now. Stand down." Eli's heart raced. He had expected hostility, maybe even a fight, but not hesitation from the princess herself. She was supposed to be the embodiment of command and certainty. And yet she was conflicted, torn between duty and something else, something he couldn't yet name. "What is it that makes you hesitate?" Eli asked softly. "If this is about loyalty, you have every right to fight me." Arelys took a careful step closer, closing the distance between them just enough to feel the warmth of his presence. "It's not loyalty," she said. "It's recognition. I recognize something in you, human, something I haven't seen in centuries of rule, and I do not know what to do with it." Eli felt his chest tighten. The words, simple yet layered with unspoken meaning, struck a chord he didn't expect. Recognition, respect, something deeper, perhaps even admiration. He realized then that this was more than a political encounter. This was personal. "You don't have to understand it," he said quietly. "I'm not here to be understood. I'm here because someone needs to be." Arelys' brow furrowed, the crown on her head catching the light as she considered his words. There was tension in her shoulders, a subtle tremor that spoke louder than any command. She was the queen of a powerful world, yet in this moment she felt fragile, human even. The knight's hand twitched toward his weapon again, but Arelys' glance stopped him. The brief exchange said everything. Obey her or face consequences. "You are reckless," she murmured, almost to herself, "and yet you are not afraid." Eli shrugged, a small, almost defiant gesture. "Fear doesn't help. Courage doesn't always either. But you're the one who needs to decide what this encounter means." Arelys studied him, her expression unreadable, yet her eyes betrayed a storm of conflicting emotions. Duty, curiosity, and something far more intimate, far more dangerous. For the first time, she considered the possibility that a human could challenge not just her world, but her own heart. Then, unexpectedly, a sound echoed from the hall's entrance, the faint metallic click of more armor signaling reinforcements. Eli's pulse quickened. They weren't alone anymore, and the fragile tension between him and Areles was now at risk of shattering entirely. "Go," Areles whispered sharply, almost urgently. "Before they see us together, before it becomes something it shouldn't." Eli hesitated, sensing the weight behind her words. She wasn't just warning him. She was confessing, in a way only royalty could, that she had already started to care despite herself. "I can't just leave," he said, his voice low, almost a growl. "Not when this is about more than me." Her eyes softened, and for a fleeting heartbeat, the golden hall seemed to hold its breath along with them. The unspoken connection between human and princess stretched thin, like a thread about to snap, or to bind them forever. Outside, the sounds of approaching guards grew louder. The fragile, dangerous intimacy of the moment threatened to explode. Choices had to be made, alliances decided, and hearts tested. And in that charged, golden-lit hall, both Eli and Areles realized survival was no longer the only challenge. Their hearts and their worlds were at stake. The next move could change everything. The soft clatter of approaching boots echoed through the hall, drawing sharp lines of tension across the polished floor. Eli's gaze darted to the entrance, then back to Princess Areles. Her composure had returned, but only barely. The flicker of uncertainty in her brown eyes betrayed the storm she tried to hide behind her golden mask of authority. "They will not understand this mating," she said, voice low but firm. "If they see you here, even for a second, it could mean war or worse." "I've survived worse than politics," Eli replied, though the edge in his tone made her flinch. "But I didn't come here to start one." Areles stepped closer, the light catching the intricate embroidery of her golden dress. Every movement radiated power, yet it no longer intimidated him. Instead, it drew him in, a dangerous gravity he could not resist. "You understand little of our world," she said, her voice softer now, almost intimate. "But somehow you survive where others fail. That unsettles me." Eli exhaled slowly. Unsettling isn't always bad. Sometimes it's necessary. Her gaze sharpened. "Necessary? That is what they told me about you too, that you are a necessary disturbance, a human anomaly. Yet you stand here not as a threat but as—" she hesitated, searching for words she dared not speak aloud. "As something else." Eli's pulse quickened. The way she said it, like she feared the truth more than any blade, made him realize how fragile this moment was. Too fragile, too precious. A sudden shift in the shadows caught his eye. From behind a grand column, a figure stepped forward, another Vathari noble, clad in ceremonial black and silver armor. His expression was unreadable, but the cold precision in his movements screamed authority. "Your Highness," the man said, voice tight, "the human has no place here. Orders are clear. He must be detained." Areles' shoulders squared, her fingers brushing the edge of her crown. "Not now," she said sharply. Her brown eyes locked on Eli, a silent command, "Trust me." Eli understood instantly. She was placing herself between him and the threat. "Then you leave me no choice," the noble said, taking a cautious step forward. Before he could act, Areles raised her hand and spoke a single word in Vathari, sharp and decisive. The hall seemed to respond, the golden light flickering as though alive. The noble froze, startled, then bowed quickly, stepping back as if invisible strings pulled him away. Eli exhaled, tension leaving his shoulders for the first time in hours. "You're full of surprises," he said. Areles tilted her head, a shadow of a smile touching her lips. "I must be, or I would not have survived this long." Her eyes softened as she studied him, and for a brief moment the hall felt like a private world, separate from duty, from politics, from the expectations of both their civilizations. "You're not afraid," she said, almost as a question. "Not of you," he replied simply. The words hung between them, heavy and dangerous. Aralise felt her heart skip, though she would never admit it aloud. No one had looked at her like that, with such measured intensity, with respect and curiosity all at once. "Then you must understand," she said finally, voice low, almost vulnerable, "that being here, standing before me, it changes everything. Not just for you, but for me." Eli nodded, understanding more than she could say. "I'm here for what needs to be done, not what's safe." Her eyes searched his face, lingering on the faint scars etched across his jaw and hands, remnants of battles and survival. In those moments, she realized that courage was not the absence of fear, it was the willingness to step into it. And this human had stepped straight into hers, unflinching. The golden hall seemed to hum around them, shadows lengthening and bending with the tension, echoing the unspoken question. Could two beings from such different worlds ever truly stand together, without fear of the consequences? Aralise turned slightly, eyes scanning the hall. "The others will return soon," she warned. "We have only moments. Tell me, human, what is it you truly seek here?" Eli's gaze softened, the hardness of a warrior giving way to something quieter, more personal. "I came to understand," he said, "and perhaps to find someone who sees more than the mission, more than the orders, more than the crowns and the crown's shadows." Aralise felt her breath hitch. For centuries she had been seen only as a ruler, a symbol, a queen. No one had ever looked at her and dared to see the person beneath. And yet here he was, standing with unwavering honesty, offering a glimpse into a connection she did not know she had been craving. The golden light shifted again, painting the hall in streaks of shadow and brilliance. Both of them sensed the fragility of the moment. One wrong step, one misunderstanding, and it could all shatter. And somewhere deep in her chest, Aralise realized that the human warrior had not just arrived in her hall. He had arrived inside her world, and perhaps even inside her heart. Outside, the approaching boots grew louder, a reminder that time was slipping away. But for now, in the golden-lit silence, two impossible worlds hung together on a thread, trembling in anticipation of what would come next. And neither of them wanted to let go. The distant clatter of approaching guards grew louder, each metallic step echoing against the vast columns. Eli's gaze flicked to the grand doors of the hall. He had survived deserts, alien ambushes, and even betrayal from his own kind, but nothing had ever made his heart race like the presence of Princess Aralise. The golden light spilling through the windows wrapped around her like a halo, and he couldn't help but notice the subtle shift in her posture, the way her fingers trembled slightly as she adjusted her crown. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered, the sound carrying both warning and something else he couldn't name. Her brown eyes, usually so unreadable, flickered with a mix of worry and something dangerously close to fascination. "And yet," he said, stepping just slightly closer, I didn't come to bow or beg. I came because someone needs to stand here, someone who won't be blinded by fear." Aralise studied him, her lips pressing into a line as if holding back words she shouldn't say. She had spent decades learning control, reading intentions, predicting moves. And yet this human, this stranger, defied all her expectations. His calm defiance, his unwavering gaze, it was unlike anything she had ever encountered. "You speak as if you know me," she said, voice low, "but you barely understand what it means to live in my world." "I understand enough," Eli replied. "I understand what it means to face impossible odds and survive, and I understand what it means to meet someone worth trusting, even if they are different." Her breath hitched, but she masked it behind a practiced blink. "Different," she echoed softly, almost like tasting the word. She didn't allow herself to look away from him, even as her knight shifted nervously behind her. Suddenly, a shadow moved across the far side of the hall, a guard breaking formation, a misstep in the otherwise flawless symmetry of her palace. Eli's eyes narrowed. "They're coming faster," he said, tension threading his words. "We have moments, not minutes." Aralys exhaled, the weight of centuries of duty pressing down on her shoulders. "I cannot risk my people or my crown for a human, no matter how compelling you are." "Then risk it for the truth," Eli said, his tone firm. "Not for me, for what's right." Her eyes widened at the conviction in his voice. No one had spoken to her like that, not the counselors, not the generals, not even her closest advisors. And in that moment, she felt the stirrings of something dangerous: admiration, curiosity, maybe even trust. "You have courage," she murmured, "and recklessness in equal measure. That combination could destroy worlds or save them." Eli's lips quirked into a small, ironic smile. "I'll take the risk. That's all I've ever known." Aralys stepped closer, their proximity charged with tension and unspoken questions. The hall seemed to pulse around them, the golden light flickering as if responding to their presence. "You do not understand the forces aligned against you," she said softly. "And yet, I cannot turn away." Eli met her gaze, sensing the flicker of vulnerability beneath her regal mask. "I don't want you to," he said quietly. "I want you to see me for what I am, not what they fear." Aralys felt her chest tighten, the weight of centuries of expectation pressing down, yet somehow lighter than it had ever been. She realized that in this human she saw clarity, honesty, and a spark of something she had long forgotten she could feel: connection. A sudden shout from the entrance cut through the fragile intimacy. The guards were near, and the tension threatened to explode into violence. Eli's hand instinctively went to his sword, but he stopped when Aralys placed her hand on his forearm, a subtle command to wait. "You must trust me," she said, eyes locking with his. "I have a plan, but it will be dangerous." "I trust you," he said without hesitation. "I've learned to trust the impossible." Aralys allowed herself a brief, almost imperceptible smile. The moment was fleeting, yet it carried the weight of unspoken promises, of alliances formed in the quiet tension between worlds. Eli sensed it too, the uncharted path unfolding before them, fragile and dangerous, yet impossible to resist. He could feel the golden light warming his skin, the hall breathing around them, the promise of something beyond orders, beyond duty, beyond fear. And then the doors burst open. Guards poured into the hall, weapons raised, voices sharp with command. The fragile thread of quiet intimacy shattered, replaced by chaos. Yet in the eye of that storm, Eli and Aralys shared a single, unspoken understanding. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Because in this hall of gold, in a world divided by duty and fear, two hearts had already found each other. And nothing, not tradition, not loyalty, not armies, could undo that. Outside, the palace trembled with the first echoes of conflict. Inside, a human and an alien princess prepared to redefine everything. The hall erupted into controlled chaos. Guards streamed in, polished weapons glinting under the golden light, shouting orders in Vathari. The knight behind Aralys stepped forward, sword drawn, eyes locked on Eli. But the princess raised a hand, halting him mid-motion, her brown eyes blazing with authority and something far more personal. "This is not a battle to be won with blades," she said sharply, her voice carrying over the shouts. "Stand down." Eli glanced at her, astonished. She was not pleading, she was commanding, and every person in the hall instinctively obeyed. The knight hesitated, jaw tight, before retreating reluctantly. Aralys' fingers grazed the edge of her crown, and Eli realized the weight of her role pressed on her more than any weapon. "You shouldn't have come," she whispered as the guards regrouped at the doorway. "You don't understand the consequences." "I've faced consequences before," Eli said, taking a cautious step closer. "But not like this, not with you in the room." Her eyes flickered, betraying a rush of emotion she could not, or would not, name. She had trained to suppress distraction, to maintain control. And yet, every instinct screamed that this human was unlike any adversary, any ally, any person she had ever encountered. He challenged her world without even trying. "We have seconds," she said, urgency threading her voice. "If they see you leave, it could ignite a war before anyone understands what is happening." Eli's mind raced. Strategy had always been his comfort, but the unpredictability of Arely's world left him disoriented. Yet her presence grounded him. He didn't need understanding, he needed trust, and she had already extended it. "What's the plan?" he asked quietly. Arely's gaze hardened, her hands moving with fluid precision. "You follow my lead. No sudden moves. Let me create the path. I've done this before, just not with someone like you at my side." Eli nodded, silently marveling at the combination of authority and vulnerability she carried. "I'll follow," he said, "but I'm not hiding. Not from you, not from them." Arely's lips pressed into a thin line, a silent acknowledgement that she did not expect him to. Together, they moved toward a hidden passageway she had memorized in childhood, long before anyone imagined a human would stand in her throne room. The walls of the hall shimmered in gold, a silent witness to the improbable alliance forming between two worlds. A guard stepped forward, doubt flashing in his eyes. Arely's gaze locked onto him, and the air seemed to tighten. "Step aside," she commanded, her voice soft yet unyielding. The man froze, then backed away, eyes wide with awe and fear. Eli followed, the golden light brushing across his features as he studied her. He realized that every gesture she made, every word she spoke, was deliberate. She carried authority not because she demanded it, but because she earned it, an authority that extended beyond rules, beyond fear, and now, astonishingly, to him. They reached the hidden corridor, the golden glow of the hall fading behind them. Silence replaced chaos, but the danger was far from over. Every step through the narrow passage was a gamble. Guards could discover them at any moment, and the uncertainty gnawed at their resolve. Eli finally broke the silence. "You're not just a princess," he said, voice low, almost reverent. "You're a warrior, too." Arely's eyes met his, and for the first time the mask of royalty slipped entirely. There was a spark in her gaze, fierce, unguarded, alive. "And you are, unlike anyone I've ever known," she said softly. The words hung in the air between them, heavier than the threat behind the hall doors. In that moment, strategy and survival intertwined with something far more delicate: trust, admiration, and an unspoken bond that neither could ignore. As the corridor twisted and narrowed, a distant alarm echoed through the palace. They were not alone, but they were together. And in that togetherness, Eli realized that fear had lost its grip entirely. Because whatever awaited them at the end of this passage, whatever challenge or confrontation, the human and the alien princess would face it as one. And that realization, fragile as it was, carried a dangerous, electrifying power. The promise that two hearts from worlds apart could redefine the fate of both. The golden hall faded behind them, but its light lingered in their eyes, guiding them toward the impossible path ahead. And somewhere deep in both their hearts, a single, unspoken question remained. Could they survive not just the enemies outside, but the growing force between them? The hidden corridor opened onto a narrow balcony overlooking the palace courtyard. The moonlight bathed the alien architecture in silver, washing over Eli and Arely's in stark contrast to the golden glow of the hall they had left behind. Below, guards scurried in chaotic formation, searching, shouting, unaware that their quarry had slipped past them. Eli leaned slightly over the balcony railing, scanning the scene. "They're everywhere," he muttered. "We can't stay here long." Arely stepped closer, her hand brushing his arm, not a touch born of necessity but of something far riskier. Her gaze was steady, unwavering. "We leave through the eastern gates," she said. "It's the only route that isn't watched, but you must follow exactly. One wrong move," her words hung in the air, unspoken threats and promises interwoven. "I've never followed anyone blindly," Eli said, a hint of humor in his voice. "But I trust you." Her lips curved into the faintest of smiles, almost imperceptible. For a moment, centuries of protocol, centuries of expectation, melted away. She had trained herself to rule, to command, to survive. But this human, this unpredictable, steadfast human, challenged her in ways she hadn't anticipated. Not just her authority, but her heart. They descended carefully, moving along the narrow outer ledges of the palace walls, the night wind tugging at their clothes, the silence between them thick with unspoken words. Eli noticed the subtle tension in her posture, the way her fingers flexed lightly near the folds of her gown, and he understood. The princess who ruled a world was also a person who feared, who hoped, and who had already begun to care. "You're reckless," she said suddenly, her voice low. "I've never met anyone who would follow through walls of danger like you do." "And you," he replied, eyes on her, "are fearless in a way I've never seen. Not because you don't feel fear, but because you face it, even when it terrifies you." Her breath caught, and for the first time, she did not mask the flicker of vulnerability that passed across her features. A moment of honesty lingered between them, dangerous in its intimacy. A sudden shout from below shattered the fragile calm. A patrol had spotted movement on the courtyard balconies. Eli's hand instinctively went to his sword, but Arelys held up a finger. "Wait." With precision born of centuries of training, she whispered instructions in Vathari. Moments later, shadows shifted and the guards below were distracted, giving them a fleeting window. Eli's heart pounded, not just from the danger, but from the proximity of her, the undeniable bond forming in the midst of chaos. They reached the edge of the eastern gate. Below, the streets stretched into the city, unguarded but unfamiliar. Eli looked to her. "After this, what happens?" Arelys hesitated. "I do not know," she admitted. "I cannot predict the council, the armies, or the worlds that will come after us. But I know this. I cannot turn back now, not from you, not from what we started." He reached for her hand, a silent promise of solidarity. She did not pull away. Instead, their fingers intertwined, a fragile connection in a world that demanded caution and control. Together, they stepped into the darkness, leaving the Golden Hall, the guards, and the weight of their titles behind. The city stretched before them, dangerous and unknown, yet somehow alive with possibility. In the quiet night, Eli realized something profound. He had crossed worlds, survived impossible odds, and found a connection that defied everything he knew. And Arelys, royal, untouchable, brilliant, was not just an ally or a queen. She was someone who had opened herself to the impossible, trusting him despite everything. They ran through the shadowed streets, the cool night wind whipping around them, hearts pounding in sync. For the first time, neither was acting for duty, for orders, or for survival alone. They were acting for each other. And in that moment, the impossible became real. Two hearts from different worlds, bound by courage and trust, had begun to rewrite the story of not just their lives, but the fate of entire civilizations. Above them, the stars stretched endlessly across the sky, silent witnesses to the daring choice of a human warrior and an alien princess. And though the path ahead was uncertain, one truth was clear. They had already crossed the divide together. The golden halls, the shadows, the fears, they were all behind them now. And nothing could ever be the same again.